see what I have always seen in you.
You're the one to tell my story. When you sing, my voice will be heard. I trust that you can tell my story. There is strength in your heart, in your word. But how can I ever walk in your footsteps? How will I know what to say? You're the one to tell my story. I know you will find your own way. But who am I to tell this story? And who am I to be the one? At 16 I slept without worry. At 16 you fought with your gun. And who am I to tell this story? What you saw survived and rose above. The world went dark and betrayed you. You turned your pain into love. So I'll gather my courage. I will gather my laughter. I will gather these stories and cry. If not me, then who will tell this story? All I can do is, Bubby, I promise, I'll try.
Like most synagogues, Temple Bethel of Boca Raton has its share of art and literature that serves as a reminder of the Holocaust and its incomprehensible horrors. As potent as these items are, Torahs rescued from the Holocaust, books that sit on our shelves, and art of the Holocaust that adorns our walls, the events of 1939 to 1945 were experienced not by Torahs or books or art, but by real people. For those who survived the Shoah, it not only must have been difficult to go on in light of all that they have experienced, but to watch the world try to comprehend the horrors of that time and that place. For one survivor, Judith Ginsburg, these events were never far away. 2 of her 4 children were born in the Fehrenwald displaced persons camp in Germany. And when her own children grew, one of her grandchildren told her story and turned it into a musical called Bubby's Kitchen. There is no one right way to remember the Holocaust. But tonight, we take you inside the genesis of one woman's story, the cantor who set her grandmother's story to music, and the reminder it serves that we all have a role as a reminder, now more than ever. I'm Rabbi Jessica Spitelnik-Mates, and we welcome you to Through Her Granddaughter's Eyes, a Holocaust survivor's tale and musical journey.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mates. I am Michelle Auslander Cohen, and I am the Cantorial Soloist at Temple Bethel. I'm particularly proud to be a part of tonight's program because Cantor Shira Ginsburg is not only a phenomenal cantor and human being who wrote, produced, and performs in Bubby's Kitchen, she's also my relative through marriage. Shira Ginsburg is an ordained cantor celebrating her 15th year of service at East End Temple in Manhattan. Shira earned her master's, cantorial degrees, and ordination from Hebrew Union College Institute of Religion. Shira is the recipient of the 2019 Lev Aryeh Heart of a Lion Award from the Jewish Partisans Educational Foundation, Women of Reformed Judaism Award, Cantorial Alumni Association Prize, and Sylvia Davidson Memorial Award for extraordinary diligence in mastering Chazanut. Prior to her cantorial studies, Shira received her BFA from Syracuse University's Drama and Musical Theater program and spent a number of years in New York working as a professional actress, singer, and songwriter. In spring of 2016, Shira premiered her one-woman musical, Bubby's Kitchen, off-Broadway to rave reviews and has toured the country extensively over the last 6 years, bringing Bubby's Kitchen to over 25 communities. We are so proud tonight to welcome Cantor Shira Ginsburg.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Cantor Shira Ginsburg. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here with you all this evening. And I also would like to thank both Rabbi and Michelle for such a lovely introduction. I am thrilled to be presenting some elements of my one-woman musical called Bubby's Kitchen. And very quickly, I want to explain that this show takes place in a few different times and in a few different places. So though it is a one-woman show, I portray myself, Shira, as the narrator throughout, but I also become my Bubby. I become my Tonta Lakey. I become my 3 aunts. And at one point, I even become my Zadie. And we journey backwards in time to my grandmother's experience in the forests as a partisan. So what is a partisan? A partisan, very simply, is a resistance fighter. So over the course of the years of the Shoah, hundreds of thousands of people were partisans, were resistance fighters. But of those hundreds of thousands, 30,000 were Jews. That might seem like a large number, but in comparison to the 6 million Jews who perished, in fact, it is such a small number. These 30,000 Jews managed to escape in myriad ways. My grandmother escaped from the trains, from the lines of getting into the trains in the Lida ghetto. She found her way to the woods, and she, in fact, became a partisan with 2 different partisan units over the course of the war. So we'll learn a little bit more about this show through clips and through my singing of different songs, but a little bit about how this show came to be. When I was looking towards my master's and cantorial ordination at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, cantorial students are tasked with creating some kind of a senior recital. And I knew that I had this story in me. And I have known my grandparents' stories since far before I can remember. I think they are imprinted in my DNA. And I knew that I wanted to tell this story in some way. And this seemed like the right opportunity to be able to do that. And so I set about creating a show and wrote the script. But once I performed the show for the very first time, that was in 2009, I was approached by a number of people asking me if I could please come to their communities to perform the show. And so very organically, the show started to take on a life of its own and it started to grow. And very soon I realized that there was not only a desire, but a need for this show to travel and for people to be able to learn about the Shoah through the lens of one family's story. The number 6 million can be so overwhelming. Numbers are so overwhelming, but when we look at history through the lens of one person's story or one family story, suddenly it becomes much more relatable and much more understandable. So I started working with Jonathan Commissar, Cantor Jonathan Commissar, who is a wonderful colleague of mine, also a brilliant musical theater composer. And together we wrote the lyrics to all of the music that is now in Bubby's Kitchen, and he composed all of the music. As I mentioned before, I wrote the script. And I have had the distinct privilege of working alongside some incredible other artists to bring Bubby's Kitchen to the stage. So Shelley Williams, who is a dear friend, who's also the director of the 2016 production in New York. And Rick Bertone is our music director. So I am honored to be able to share this show with you this evening, and I'm so thrilled to be able to do this in conversation with your wonderful clergy team.
Some of her stories are hard for me to hear. They're harder for her to tell. The very first story that I ever remember knowing about my Bubby was how she found her way to the Partisans. Standing in line to get on the trains in the Lida ghetto. German soldiers are everywhere. Where are you taking us? Es ist nicht gut. He told me I should run, that I was too pretty, that he would pretend to shoot at me. I looked at my sister, holding her baby. She said, "Run, one of us must survive." I grabbed a friend, and in a split-second decision, with shots being fired all around us, we jumped a fence and we ran. While the rest of my family was put on a train to the concentration camp Majdanek. I never saw them again. We hid in a hole in the ground, and we waited until all of the trains had left and all of the screaming and the shooting had stopped. We were hiding in the backyard of a house. And when I stood up, I was looking into a picture window and directly into the eyes of a woman holding a baby. And right behind her stood a man in a Nazi SS uniform with his back turned towards me. She didn't say a word, and we ran. We were cold, hungry, exhausted. We decided that we would knock on the next door that we came upon. And the Polish woman who answered the door, she didn't want to let us in. She wanted to call the police, but her husband said, "No, God has sent you to me. I will protect you." He took us in for the night, and he sat us down at his kitchen table, and he fed us milk and bread. It was the first food that we had eaten in days. And he came up with a plan. Now, I looked more Polish with my fair skin and my red hair, so I would marry his brother with false papers, but my friend who looked more Jewish, they would hide. But I had a different idea. I knew that there were partisans, resistance fighters in the woods, and I wanted to be there with my people. So early the next morning, this righteous Polish man, he walked with us all day to the woods. And he walked 15 feet in front of us, and he said, "If I take my hat off of my head, it means that there's danger." By nightfall, he had taken us as far as he could. And we went on deeper into the woods on our own. And each time I looked back, he was still there, waving us on. He wouldn't leave my sight until we had completely disappeared into the Nalaboki Pushja. The woods,
that would become my home for the next 2 years of my life. I made my way to the Rashchinsky Partisan unit, where on my very first night, they handed me a gun and they told me to stand guard. I was 16. I had lost everyone and everything I loved. They left me all alone. It's so cold. Still, die Nacht ist ausgesternt und die Frost hat gebrannt. Sie denkst du, wie ich hab dich gelernt? Halt den Speyer in die Hand. A Meut, a Pelzel und a Beret. Und halt in der Hand fest an a Gun. A Meut mit so mit deinem Ponym. Hit auf dem Säunes Karawan. Gezielt, geschossen und getroffen. Heut ihr kleine Kehrpistol in die Teufelchen mit Waffen verhalten und sie mit in Keul.
Shira, tell us the story of how your grandmother ended up in the woods that night.
Sure. So my grandmother was born and lived in a city called Lida in Poland. And most of her family had been rounded up and killed in the first Shrita. But she and her sister and her brother-in-law and their 2 children survived. And they were in the ghetto and they were rounded up. And they were supposed to be getting on the trains, which eventually went to Majdanek. They did not know where the trains were going at the time. And my grandmother, who was 16 years old, turned to this Polish soldier and she said, "Where are they taking us?" And he said, it's not good. Wherever it is, it's not good. I don't know. And she said, "I'm going to run." And he said, "You should run and I'll pretend to shoot at you." And he took her star off of her clothing. And her sister, Rashka, said, "You need to run right now. One of us has to survive." And so she, in a split-second decision, she grabbed the hand of a friend, of someone else who was next to her in line that she knew, and they ran. And she jumped over a fence and she hid inside a hole in the ground until all of the shooting and all of the screaming had stopped and until the trains had left. And she and this friend of hers were completely alone and didn't know where they were or what to do. And they eventually found their way. They started walking. They found their way to the home of actually someone they did not know, but a local shoemaker who had learned his craft, they found out, from a Jewish man. So when they knocked on the door, his wife answered the door and she didn't want to let them in. And the husband came and said, "No, God sent you to me and I'm going to take care of you." And he brought them into his house and he took care of them. And my grandmother told him she really wanted to get to the woods, to the partisans. She knew there were partisans, and he helped them. The next day, he walked them to the woods, and she and her friend made their way into the woods. And there was some semblance, there was a barn, there was a meetup place. And the interesting thing is that women were generally not taken into these units. Basically, only 10% of partisans were women. And often these women were cooks or acted as gatherers or nurses. My grandmother actually, in the Rashchinsky partisan unit on the first night, they asked her if she knew how to hold a gun, if she'd ever used a gun. And she said, yes. She totally lied. She'd never used a gun before. And they said, okay, you're going to stand guard. And so what that song depicts is my imagination of what it was like for her on that very first night, holding a gun alone in the woods at 16 years old, having never held a gun before. And she was fully in charge of protecting this unit. And that night, she proved herself to this unit, to the Rishchinsky unit. And in fact, they kept her. And she was a fighter. Went on missions, and she continued to fight with the partisans for the rest of the war.
Wow.
That's such an incredible story. I can't even imagine. I'm curious, how much did she talk about that night or the beginning of that time with you while you were growing up?
So I don't remember the first time I heard the story. I remember as a little kid being confused that my grandparents lived in the woods. And I sort of thought, what does that mean that you lived in the woods? Did you pitch tents? You know, and as a child, I grew up hearing the stories and not fully comprehending what they meant. I remember when Schindler's List came out and I was in high school, I was in 9th grade. We went to see it as a community, and I remember learning her story and my grandfather's story. He was in a different unit in Iskra, which was a Russian unit. I remember learning more about their stories as a young adult then. But certainly as I, grew up through my adolescence, through my teenage years, I was one of only 7 Jews, I think, in my high school. And I started to recognize that it was my responsibility to start talking and telling the stories. So then I had to really know the stories that I was talking about. And she has continued to talk about them more and more and more as all of her children and grandchildren now do some form of Holocaust education in all sorts of different ways in our own communities. So,
what did you think about in your mind's eye when you began to imagine that first night that your Bubby went through?
Well, I think the end result of what is in my mind's eye is that song, and how we crafted that in the show is Still die Nacht, which was written by Hirsch Glick, by the way. That was a partisan song from the actual partisans. He also wrote the partisan or lead, but the lighting design of the show that evening for that particular scene, the image of her shaking and being alone in the woods, that there's just darkness all around her. And anytime I have pictured that evening, I think about, what does it mean to be a 16-year-old? To be 16 years old and to have just lost everybody in your life, that alone is unimaginable. But then to be tasked with this responsibility of, guarding for an entire unit and knowing that your life depends on it. A lot of terror and also a tremendous amount of courage. So that is always what I see. That is always how I view her.
Amazing. So we have this bigger question. How do you process this history of persecution that happens one family at a time?
Watching my Tonta Lakey light Shabbos candles, it was like watching her journey backwards through time. And when she would lift her hands to cover her eyes, I know that the names and the faces and the stories that must have passed through her mind were all from a world that had vanished, a world she could never return to.
Salke's smile, Tverke's hair, Avram's books that he'd study, Shalom's eyes, Masha's songs, the pond where the children got muddy, Shabbos teacups with cracks through them, Tata telling stories late at night, neighbors gossiping in the marketplace, Mama gently tucking us in at night. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. One night a week I see them, a strike of a match, and they are here. One night a week I free them. In this light, somehow they are here. Matka's laugh, Itzik's beard, Esther's dress at her wedding, Basia's prayers, Freitka's jokes, as we lay on our soft feather bedding. Boys from Cheder running home for lunch, sweet words of Talmud dripping off their tongue. The rabbi's tallest dances as he teaches them, every word as old as it is young. One night a week I hear them. These candles are lit, they call my name. One night a week I'm near them. In this light my world stays the same. One night a week, one night a week, Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'chad likner shel Shabbat. Mama's hat Amen.
So, Shira, what inspired you to write a song from Tonta Lakey's perspective?
Tonta Lakey was just this beautiful soul. She was a gutta neshama. She was this little lady with blue hair. And she was always smiling and cooking and just filled with love. And she was deeply religious. And I would say that aside from Maizedi, she was really the most religious, and in some ways differently religious than Maizedi. She had a devout faith. And so when I thought about a song of lighting Shabbos candles, she was very, very clearly the person that I wanted to give that ritual to in the show. I grew up in a very close-knit family, and so all of these characters, she's my great aunt, but she might as well, she was another grandmother to me in many ways. And her experience of living life in America, more than anyone else, was really rooted in her past. It was almost like she never fully acclimated to life here. She always lived a part of her life at any given moment looking into her mind's eye and into her past. So that was a very, very natural person that I could utilize in the show to talk about how people don't just live their lives forgetting. Very much everyone who was lost lives on through the present in memory and in ritual and in action.
it's such a beautiful image that you created of her just now. I'm wondering what other roles she might have played in your life, and, you know, what role did she play for you in becoming a cantor even?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. So she and her second husband, her first husband passed away before I was born, but her second husband was a tailor, and they used to come to Bubby's kitchen. Everybody was in Bubby's kitchen. Everybody was always at Bubby's house. And they used to spend a lot of time sewing, and she used to make me, I'm going to use her accent. She said, "I made you a velvet skoit." She used to, and she was so proud that she could make us these beautiful clothes, and she just wanted to give. She always wanted to give, and she was deeply deeply admiring of her older brother, my Zadie, and she always looked to him for answers to any questions. And I watched that love of family in the way that he took care of her as he did throughout the war, and his other sister, my Aunt Frida. And so my grandfather really was this patriarch in our family, not just for his wife, children, grandchildren, but for his sisters and, you know, for basically all of Troy, New York, I would like to say.
What are some of the feelings that come up when you sing this song?
Oh, honestly, it is so difficult for me not to cry when I sing this song. It is one of the challenges of the whole show, but this song in particular. So the very first person that I mention is Tzalke. And Tzalke was my Zadie and Tonta Lakey's brother. And Tzalke was, as my grandfather was, a real hero. They both were munitions experts and blew up trains. They blew up the Tartak, which was a power plant, basically. So they sabotaged and were awarded with the Lenin Medal of Honor, the highest honors from the Russian army, because they were in a Russian unit. And he was very tragically killed just after the war by a band of white Polish nationalists. And it is something that lived with all of us. I never knew him, but I feel like he was my great uncle. I feel that I know him. My father is named for him, Chaim Betzalel. He was Tzalke Betzalel. So to have his name mentioned first was very important to me.
The songs we've listened to up till now talk about the past, but we have to come to the present if we are to take these stories forward with us. And I think about over the last year or two, the groundbreaking ways we have come to tell the stories of survivors in modern times. I think of a visit to the Holocaust Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, and putting on virtual reality glasses and literally walking in the steps of the survivor and the very camp that he survived. And I think about Instagram that took a story of a young girl named Eva who died during the Holocaust and turned her story of 75 years ago into an Instagram story, as if she had had access to Instagram in her time and her place. And it got millions and millions of views. That's what we have to do, is figure out how to take the past and bring it alive. And these songs we will hear tell us how Shira figured out how to do that.
And so I headed off to Syracuse University to get my BFA in musical theater. And as soon as I had that diploma, I headed to New York City. I was going to become a great actress, and I was going to become a super successful actress, and I was going to make everybody proud. So whenever I came home from wherever I was in New York, doing whatever I was doing, my Bubby would sit me down at the kitchen table, and she would say to me, "Shirka, you should eat a bowl of soup. I made it special just for you. Now listen to me. You are a good person. You are an attractive person. You are a talented person. And don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. So, no, what's been going on?" Bubby, I wanted to be a great actress. I knew from a tender young age. Remember when all of the cousins turned your backyard into our stage? With your makeup and aprons and hairspray, we produced Snow White, Cinderella, and Fame. I promised myself at that moment that the world would remember my name. And now all eyes are on me as I belt the high C. The audience jumps to their feet. Bubby, I'm finally on Broadway and 214th Street. Hi, Bubby. Listen, I just signed a lease on this great new apartment. Yeah, it's on 214th Street. Oh, no. Listen, the area is totally safe. The mayor's report just came out and said that the homicide rate is really falling. We only had 3 shootings last week, and out of those, only 1 of them is in critical condition. Broadway's just around the corner, Bubby. Broadway's just around the bend. I'm taking voice lessons, tap dancing, diction, and Xanax. I know it'll pay off in the end. Broadway's just around the corner, Bubby. It's calling just a few blocks away. Just 3 more auditions. I have my suspicions. Today is gonna be my day. Oh, listen, I just got a great new job. Yeah, I'm waitressing at an upscale Hungarian goulash bar in Tribeca. It's great. I get to wear a headdress and an embroidered dijma. It's a little constricting and hard to breathe, but on the upside, my accent's getting really good. Hello, would you like a drink und our wunder goulash of the day? Broadway's just around the corner, Bubby. Broadway's just around the bend. I'm taking beatboxing, yoga, and ginkgo biloba. I know it'll pay off in the end. Broadway's just around the corner, Bubby. It's calling just a few blocks away. If I get this call back, my Hungarian fallback will instantly fade away. Hi, Bubby. Oh, no, not at the waitressing job anymore. It didn't really work out. But that's okay. I have something even better. I'm working for a company that is really on the rise. Yeah, it's called Ginsu. They make the most amazing knives. No, not in a storefront exactly. I'm selling them door to door. But it's going really great. Konnichiwa. I'm Shira Ginsburg. My Bubby mentioned I'd be swinging by. Yes, I'm selling these fabulous knives, but as we like to say here at Ginsu, they really sell themselves. Now, our kitchen shears cut through absolutely anything. Do you have a penny? Broadway's just around the corner, Bubby. Broadway's just around the bend. I'm taking tango, hypnosis to stave off psychosis. I know it'll pay off in the end. Broadway's just around the corner, Bubby. It's calling just a few blocks away. And though I look like Bette Midler, why can't I book Fiddler? When's it gonna be my day? Hi, Bubby. No, I couldn't keep the knife job after the incident. You heard about that? No, his eye's gonna be just fine. It was just a scratched cornea. I mean, those things heal, right? Anyway, it's okay. I have a new job. Yeah, I'm working as a standardized patient. I go into the hospital and I pretend to have a disease, and the medical students have to practice their intake skills on me. Yeah, Bubby, listen, I gotta get going. I have to get up to Mount Sinai Hospital. Today I'm playing a prostitute named Destiny with an acute but problematic addiction to crystal meth. Love you. Wasn't I supposed to be a Broadway star? What happened to my plan? Is it my destiny to play Destiny? Is my life slipping out of my hands? So where is the orchestra
orchestra that's tuning to A? Where is the overture to start up my play? A struggling young actress is such a cliche. No. You know what, Dr. Kirschenbaum? My name is not Destiny. It's Shira Ginsburg. And I am not a prostitute. And I am not a crystal meth addict. I'm not even a patient. I am an actress. I have my BFA. And the next time you see me, I won't be wearing this paper gown. I will be starring as Eponine in Les Mis. I'll be Blanche in Streetcar. I'll be Ophelia in Hamlet. And by the way, just so you know, I'm telling my Bubby that this was a date. Okay, thanks. Hit it. Broadway's just around the corner. Bubby! Broadway's just around the bend. I'll be at the marquee, they'll be cheering for me. All the bows that I'll steal, starring at the O'Neill. When the tickets start selling, I know you'll be felling. I know I'll make it to Broadway. That's below 214th Street.
This song is obviously comedic relief in a very serious show. Why was it important for you to have a number like this in the show?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you think it's funny. I think that every show, when you're thinking from a theatrical perspective, you need to give the audience a break. You need to give them an opportunity to laugh. But the truth is, throughout the entire show, there's so much humor, because there was so much humor in Bubby's Kitchen. There's so much humor in growing up with all of these different characters, and we love to get together and we love to laugh. So that was important to put into the show. But also, all of the things that I talk about in that song are real. I really did those things. I really did sell knives. I really did work as a standardized patient and went into hospitals and tried to help educate medical students. So that's just the truth about what it was like trying to be an actress in New York City. And then it's layered on top of, where I came from and why, it was important to me to paint a picture to my Bubby whenever I called her to report back about what was going on in my life.
It's really amazing, all the different things that you've done, all the different talents that you have. So, in this song, you're trying to convince your Bubby that you're doing something super significant and very important so that you don't feel like you're letting her down. I'm curious, how do you feel the pressure is different for you as a third generation survivor in comparison to your father, who's a second generation survivor? And was there any pressure that you felt from him as well?
Well, it's interesting, and it's something that I really do talk about and explore in the show, is this idea that I, as a third generation grandchild, like many third generation grandchildren, never wanted to cause my grandparents any tsuris, any pain, any strife. And so I took it upon myself to try to, somehow protect her from this life that I was living in New York City. But, she is not a woman who needed protection from anything. And she really just wanted me to go and live my life. And, they survived something horrific and unimaginable so that I and my brother and my cousins, and so that all of us could live these wonderful lives and pursue our dreams and pursue our passions. So speaking of my father, who was born in Fehrenwald in the displaced persons camp, along with my Aunt Riva, so the two of them were born there. So in many ways, having grown up very, very close by, just a few minutes away from my grandparents' house, and with my father as an immigrant, I'm sort of a 2.5, like a second and a half generation I sometimes talk about. Certainly a different experience than what I watch my father and my aunt go through. My father became a farmer because he took over the farm from my Zadie. That was the work that he went into. And so my father also became a history teacher, but very much he felt the obligation, but even more than the obligation, maybe the onus of responsibility of taking care of his parents alongside taking care of his own family that he had created. And so that is why he, stayed and became a farmer despite going to, work at the middle school every day as well. I was much more free with a lot of expectation, of course, to, go and get a college degree and study what I wanted to study. It was an understood expectation. It wasn't even talked about necessarily that I would go and be successful at whatever it was I wanted to be successful at. The expectation is that we do things that we are proud of and that we are upstanding, good members of society, that we give back to the community, we give back to the Jewish community, that we are active and that we help people. And we live these rich and meaningful lives. In the nature of how you grow up and become the person that you're meant to become, all of us have those journeys and they're different for all of us and they're hard. And I think my grandmother really understood that and understands that to this day, that we all have our struggles. And she always tells me not to compare my struggles to her struggles, that she wouldn't have gone through those things if she didn't have to, obviously. And so she would never want anything but joy and nachas for all of us.
So trying to make it on Broadway is hard enough, but do you think you had added pressure to succeed in telling your family's story?
So it's interesting. Certainly trying to make it as an actress in New York or LA, that is tough enough. I think I understood fairly early on when I switched to go into Cantorial school that it wasn't exactly the life that I wanted. It didn't speak to who I was as a full-fledged person. And so when I wrote Bubby's Kitchen, the desire for this show to be successful was a very different feeling. I want always for my family to be proud of me, right? I want always to be doing things that I feel I am proud of. I think that I am wildly proud of creating this piece of work, of working with Jonathan to create this gorgeous score. And every time I am asked to perform the show, every time I'm asked to talk about it, I'm so proud because it means that my grandmother's story is being told. And so it is a very different measure of success than the success simply of, trying to make it, as it were, as an actress in New York City. I'm thrilled every time that I perform the show. And I think the real measure for me is after the performance, how many people come up to me from the audience and say, I grew up in a kitchen just like this, or this reminded me so much of my grandmother, or this, and they share their family story and their family story of survival. And, the foods that I talk about, just the way in which people relate to the material in this show and to the heart of this show. That is success to me. I think one of the best things ever was I had a gentleman come up to me and thanked me for the show. And then he contacted me afterward and said, "You inspired me to get in touch with my brother." And he hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. And just watching the show made him want to reach out. And I mean, there's no better success than that, I think. And so speaking of that, the next song that we're going to talk about or that we're going to see is called Who Am I? And it's the penultimate number of the show. And it is this song that speaks to recognizing that each one of us in the world has inherited a legacy, whatever that legacy is. My legacy happens to be so enormous that for me, one of the challenges in life has been to find the way in which that legacy elevates me and pushes me to be the best version of myself, rather than having that legacy, push me down or weigh me down. And so this song is a nod to the recognition that it is my time to step into my role of telling this story.
You're the one to tell my story. When you sing, my voice will be heard. I trust that you can tell my story. There is strength in your heart, in your word. But how can I ever walk in your footsteps? How will I know what to say? You're the one to tell my story. I know you will find your own way. But who am I to tell this story? And who am I to be the one? At 16 I slept without worry. At 16 you fought with your gun. And who am I to tell this story? What you saw and survived and rose above. How the world went dark and betrayed you. And how you turned your pain into love. So I'll gather my courage, I'll gather my laughter, I'll gather these stories and cry. If not me, then who will tell this story? All I can do is, Bubby, I promise I'll try.
So what does this song mean to you, and how do you feel when you sing it?
This song, I think, means everything to me. I think this is the passing down through the generations of the onus of responsibility. And I think that's really universal. Anyone can understand the need to rise to be their best selves and to take on the responsibility of moving that legacy forward. And so the unique thing about this song for me is, of course, that I sing it from dual perspectives. I sing it as my Bubby and also as me. And this idea that musically it elides one into the other. I think that in itself paints its own picture. The key change, the drama of the song, the elevation of that crescendo moment of panic, of how could I possibly tell this story when I was 16? I was, in school and you were holding a gun. How do I compare myself to that? And the understanding that that's not what it's about. I, God willing, will never have to go through anything like what my grandparents had to go through. But it is my responsibility to manage my trials and to do that with as much strength and tenacity and courage as my grandmother used when she faced her trials. And to know that that's where I come from and that is who I am in my core. And so all of those things lead to that last statement of the song: if not me, then who will tell this story? All I can do is try, Bubby. I promise I'll try. And that is, I think, the only thing that she ever asks of me and of all of us. And I think that it is something that I have set my life's work to go about doing that.
Did she see the show ever?
She has seen it many times. I'm sure she's watching right now. She loves the show. She loves
Aw,
it. Yeah.
I can't imagine how proud and how much kvelling she does. I'm sure every day, but especially when she sees you, doing what you do. Um, One of the things that I noticed so much about this song, just also being a musician, that was so brilliant about it is how you and Jonathan were able to portray your Bubby as having this beautiful calmness about her, even musically. And the way you portray her is with so much calm in the song. And then when you're playing yourself, there is that bit of anxiousness that sounds like it's stemming from just, trying to come to terms with everything, which it sounds like it's one of those processes that maybe there's never a feeling of I've come to terms with it all, but I'm comfortable with how I'm trying. Is that accurate?
I think it's very well put. There's always more work to do. There's always more growing to do in life. It's not like I've arrived at this moment and I'm like, I'm satisfied. I'm good. I got nothing else to do. It's more about accepting that this is the legacy that I've inherited, and what am I going to do about it, and what am I going to keep doing about it? And so it's a real motivator. It's a real driving force for me.
what are some things you feel you haven't done yet? Like, what projects are you working on? And what are some of your next steps in honoring your grandmother's legacy?
Sure. Well, as you all know, I became a cantor, which is something that I'm very proud of, and that my family is very proud of me for. And so I think my work as a cantor is really meaningful, and moving forward in that direction in the cantorate is one thing, but also the flexibility of what that means at this level of my career to be able to continue to do other work, and to really, now that hopefully we are at a moment with our current situation with the coronavirus, that we are looking towards coming back together and live performances. I really feel it's the moment to start bringing Bubby's Kitchen to more stages around the country. I would love to bring it to Israel. I would love to bring it, outside of the borders of just the US. I think that every time I've performed it, people have embraced it in a universal way. So, if it's an Italian family, like, there's so much about family in it that people relate to, that I do have that as a goal, as one of the next things I'd like to do.
Shira, what you've done with all of the talents that you have, right? You've taken so many parts, so many different talents, and you've taken this incredible history of your family and really just made it your own in such a unique and special and beautiful way. And one of the things that also just really struck me earlier when we were speaking about living up to a legacy was that it sounds like the most important things to her is your happiness, and that her legacy is knowing that you don't have to go through what she went through, and that you're living your fullest life possible. And I mean, through all of this, like, it's so obvious that you are. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and share your family's story, and kind of, through marriage, my family's story a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So we wish you so much more success. We hope that maybe one day we can also see Bubby's Kitchen in person, and we wish your family just continued health and happiness always. Thank you so much to Rabbi Mates for all of her wonderful insights and gifts. And thank you to all of those who were working behind the scenes, especially Ross, who's there helping make all this happen.
And thank you, Michelle. It's been a beautiful journey this evening.
And I just want to thank you both and all of you in your wonderful community for welcoming me and inviting me here to talk a little bit about this show. It's really been a pleasure and an honor, and we should all have a glass of latte. You know, we should have a little bit of mama bread.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Take care.